Hi, I'm Ztarli, and in this video I'll be drawing a dragon for my Patreon, Zempa. Zempa asked that I redraw the dragon they were currently using on their Discord as their avatar, which you can see in the top left. So I start with a sketch as normal, just sort of sketching out the shape of the dragon. And whenever I do commissions, I do stop at the sketch page and show the person before continuing on to the painting stage. So there will be a couple of spots in these videos where I actually stop or draw arrows and things like that, where I pass them on to Zempa for approval before continuing to the next step. Once I'd done the sketch, I then went on to the colour. It was fairly straightforward colouring this one, as it was just the one colour blue. I did sort of add in my own hues and details just to liven it up a bit more, but essentially just started with the flat colour and then layered on different colours of blue, so going from dark to light, and used my trusty smudge tool to smudge it all in together. I pretty much just continue this process of layering on colours and then using the smudge tool to smudge them in and blend them in more over and over and over again, and building up the shapes and making the dragon look more three-dimensional. And this is basically how I do most of my pictures nowadays, is just keep building up the colours and the different shadows and highlights, mixing in different colours, and using the smudge tool to make the blend, make it less harsh of a transition between the colors. Unless I intentionally want like a drop shadow or something, then I will leave it unsmudged in, or maybe just smudge it in just a little bit. I actually spent a bit longer on this picture than I intended to. It took me 5.5 hours to do the complete picture, including the background and borders. Most of that was down to my struggle with the scales. I really struggled on this picture to get the placement of the scales right, and you're about to see how many times I drew scales in and then painted over them or erased them and did them again and again and again. So it was very time consuming sort of process trying to figure out where the scales should go and where I should place them. I guess I was just not having the best day. It just wasn't really, some days they come out really good and I'm really happy and I get it right the first time, and sometimes I really have to sort of battle against myself trying to get the placements of the scales right. I was happy in the end. It just took me a long time to get there, much longer than I would have wanted to spend on the scales alone. You can see here I gave up on the face scales for a while, moved on to the belly scales or neck scales, because I just wasn't feeling the face scales at that point in time. And sometimes it is just better to do something else for a little while and then return to the part you're struggling with again later, and hopefully you'll be able to get it right after taking a little break. I'm just adding some more colour into this dragon now, so adding some reflection from the trees or grass that are around the dragon. And I slimmed down the neck. I thought it was a bit too thick at the base. I think it's supposed to have a longer neck, and I think the thicker base was sort of giving the idea that that was where the chest was, and I want it to appear like it has a longer neck than that. Also making some small adjustments to the length of the nose and the positioning. In the moment I'll change the positioning of the horns and the mouth to be more in line with the original picture and what Zempa actually wanted out of this drawing. And here's me about to abandon the face scales yet again. So yep, there they go. I got rid of them, and I get rid of them around the horns as well, and I redraw them again. I think this time, I think the ones that I'm doing right now are the ones I keep around the horn. I think they look a bit better. They're less, uniform, and I think that makes it a better picture. Like, not all scales are uniform, but I do just leave this cheek bear for quite some time as I just move on to other parts of the dragon and just totally avoid popping more scales onto that cheek. But I quite liked how the detailing around the eye went. I think I've been improving the sort of shape around eyes lately. Like, I used to just not draw eyelids and stuff. It'd just be like an eye in the middle of the head. But after looking at some like lizard references and things, I've decided to make sure to actually properly define the lids around the eyes on my dragons, and I think it does make a big difference and makes it a more believable sort of shape altogether. So I was quite happy with how the eye came out in this picture. I'm finally returning to those cheek scales, and I think I'm finally happy with these. I think part of my problem is I do lazy scales so often. I started to get, I think, a bit too lazy with them, and they end up too large, and when they get larger they don't look as good and become less believable. So I really need to be careful that I'm not becoming sloppy with my art and lazy because I know of a quick way to do something. So I made sure that once I got the placement right for these scales, I actually took the time to make sure they were properly shaded and looked like three-dimensional scales instead of just a bunch of spots on its face. And as I said before, I was happy with how the scales ended up at the end of the video. It just takes me a lot longer than I was anticipating to add the scales on. But yeah, you can see here I'm still struggling with some of them along the ridge of the eye and stuff like that, but I get there in the end. Yay, the dragon's finally fully covered in scales, well, at least the parts you can see. I'm now moving on to the detailing part, so I'm just finishing off these belly scales, and then I add some extra color in. Gotta add some blush just to add, I don't know, some interest to the picture, and I add some under reflection to soften up those scales that are going underneath the jaw. They shouldn't be as visible as they are, so when I do a completely scaled creature like this, I usually add some either shadow layer or reflection layer to soften up the scales that you wouldn't see as much because of the curvature of the dragon's face. Adding some more shines, and now the horns finally get some attention. I wanted them to be really shiny and glossy, so I just added a harsh light color, so like close to white but not quite white, and then put a cooler grey alongside that and smudge them together to get that sort of metallic shiny look to the horns. And now I'm going to add an additional shadow layer to the dragon, so I just choose a random color. For some reason it nearly always ends up being this weird green color, just so I can see where I've actually put the shadows, and then I'll make adjustments using hue and saturation and contrast and stuff to get these shadows to the color I actually want them to be. I just use that random green color so you know I can see what I'm doing. Then I sent it off to Zampa for approval, and they made a few changes, so I'm just making some adjustments to the picture now. We're just moving the mouth along a bit more. It does mean I need to repaint the scales around the cheek, but it wasn't like, I didn't have to redraw the whole thing or anything. It didn't take long to fix this up. And they also wanted the horns to be bigger, which I kind of already noticed myself that they were perhaps a little bit short. So we'll extend the horns out in a moment as well, which I need to make more room in the canvas to actually do so. So I'm just using the transform tool to stretch them out, and then I just fix them up so they look a bit better. I also then have to stretch out the bottom of the picture because I did make the whole canvas bigger, and this dragon head was designed to fit in a circular sort of avatar or icon shape. So I wanted to make sure it's still took up the large proportion of a circular shape, and it could be used as a avatar. I'm now adding the top highlight to the scales on the dragon and just some places of focus. I generally only use white for this final stage of highlighting and very rarely use pure white in any of the rest of the dragon, and that is because if you use white elsewhere, then you can't get any lighter than white. So if you want to have something be in focus and have like a really high shine to it, the rest of the picture has to be duller, which is why I never use white or black, because I want to save those two, the very lightest and the very darkest, for when I want to have a focus somewhere and I want to draw your eye somewhere. So the scales and skins of the dragon's pretty much done, and now moving on to the accessory, which is this little feather accessory with these, it turns out to be bone dice hanging off the horn, which I actually really enjoyed doing. I very rarely do geometrical shapes, so it was kind of fun to paint these dice, and doing the feather was fun too. I had been trying a lot of different brushes lately for feathers and fur, so I just kind of used some of these I'd already been experimenting with, and I found it really easy and pleasing to paint the feather on here and add the different colors in, and then start detailing these cubes, these bone cubes, and making them a bit more of a bone color rather than some weird yellow color that I'd made them, and adding little scratches on them and details so they look like they've been carved. And of course they need holes in the top so they can be thread through the strap, which I envision to be leather strap rather than rope, so that's why it's not like twisted like rope. It's just like a leather strap that you've tied around a feather and thread through some beads. So that's what I was envisioning when I made the accessory. I then started to design how the faces of the dice were actually going to look. I did this on a separate layer, so I had the freedom to change the design if I didn't like it or if Zempa didn't like it. And so this is just a layer above the dice layer, and I just sort of paint on top of it and add some lights to the edges of the brown part, so it looks like it's actually carved into the dice itself. Zempa was happy with it, which made me happy because I really like how these dice look. So I continued on and just finishing up this leather strap here, making it look like it's actually attached to the horn instead of just floating on it. And now it's time to do the eye. Now I decided to do more realistic eyes. So I've been looking at eyes and made it look more like a realistic eye, and I kind of like how it looks. I think it looks realistic-ish for a dragon's eye. And yeah, so, and then I add this shine on here, makes it look a bit more realistic. The black parts, I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe I should have made them white, but I still think it looks good, and I was pleased with how the eyes turned out overall. It's now time to do the background for this picture, so I'm just going to do a quick gradient here for the sky, and then I want to add some mountains to it, so we'll just add some mountains, and here we go, here's the mountains, done. Yeah, so I accidentally didn't record the part where I added the mountains in. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know if I paused it whilst I was getting a drink or if I accidentally bumped the pause button. They didn't take me long, they only took me like 5 minutes to do, and they're really simple mountains. If anyone wants to know how I did them, I can remake a tiny video to show you how they were done, but they were pretty basic. So yeah, sorry about that, Zampa. I did intend to record the whole thing for you, but unfortunately I can't turn back time when I've accidentally not recorded something, so sorry about that. As a final touch, I'm adding a beaded border to the picture. So I've just used the bone dice as inspiration for this. Just a bunch of beads on a leather strap encircling the whole dragon. I add in some blue because there's a lot of sky here. I also add in some green from imaginary plants outside of the border, and just carve into the cream with a darker brown color to make it look like it is carved bone that someone's used for beads. With some final adjustments to the colours and the borders for the picture, I'm pretty much done with this. So I'd like to thank Zampa for being a patron of mine. Thanks so much. It was a lot of fun to do this dragon, and it was a nice relaxing change of pace for me. So thank you again, Zampa. I really appreciate your patronage for and asking me to draw this dragon for you. Well, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give me a like, subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more, and if you want to support me, I also have a Patreon. See you all next time. Bye!